Let the games begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a question, and forgive my ignorance on the matter, but I'm going to explain why I have this question. And my question is, what was going on? Are the Americans, the black Americans here in America, this is my question, are the black Americans here in America under occupation by a foreign government? Now, I'm going to tell you why I asked this question, and then I'm going to give you a theory. The reason why I ask this question is because if we look through history, and we have the Eastern Hemisphere where we have the Mediterranean Sea, and we have the Western Hemisphere, we have the Gulf of America, blah, 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 right? Over the history, over the years, when I was in school, I was taught all about the Romans. I learned about the Romans, and I learned about Alexander the Great and all the great conquerors. I even heard about Shaka Zulu, right? A great African hero, Prince too. I guess too uncommon. I don't really have the time, but there's a lot of great heroes that helped shape the world that we live in today, from Africa to Germany to the United Kingdoms, to Sweden, all through from all of that on the Eastern Hemisphere. Then we got the Chinese and their great heroes that helped, and the Japanese and their great heroes that helped shape the world that we live in today. Now, when we look at the Western Hemisphere, we got the North and the South, North American and South American continents, right? And I like to focus specifically on the North American continent, right? The North American continent history, we have a lot of the stuff with the Olmecs and the Aztecs and the Mayans, right? But we don't really, they was building pyramids just like kind of like the Egyptians was. So this is why they try to put Americans back to Africa. You know, it's a little correlation going on there. So they was building pyramids here. So that's how they can correlate us back to Africa. Probably get to that later. So they was building pyramids here in the Western Hemisphere, right? That's about it. And the Mayans had the calendar, the Mayan calendar that would show whether when the world is ending and blah blah blah, which never really happened, so they don't look that smart, right? Right. So this is what was going on. Now, back in the Eastern Hemisphere, we worked Eastern Hemisphere where the Mediterranean Sea was. They had a lot of stuff going on. They had armor. They was building castles. They went from building pyramids. Then the white people had castles, and then they was traveling across the sea with boats and everything, and they was exploring new lands. And this is how there was a mass migration going on with the Vikings, as they say, as they was migrating to Britain, and the world was in the conquest and exploration mode, and everyone was trying to get out, right? All through the Mediterranean Sea, it seemed like everyone got into that mind to want to get out and conquer and spread their culture and expand, right? But over here in America, nothing was happening. Nothing. We just had Aztecs and Mayans and no great heroes that was contributing and helped shape the world, right? There are like spurts of information of people, but you really have to really freaking dig to find out anybody. There's not really like a school where you're being educated on the great heroes like you would be told about the great heroes from the Mediterranean Sea area, right? Now here's my theory. My theory is that that history is purposely obscured, because think about it. By the time that the people in the Mediterranean Sea had got up to a level of technology, which is, let's say, gunpowder, right? They already had guns. They already had black powder from like the Japanese, if I'm not mistaken. They worked this all out. All of this was happening, right? By the time that they came here to the Americas, if I'm not mistaken, they already had guns for the most part, right? When they got here to the Americas, they found a bunch of Indians and teepees and tribes still. Like, the vast majority of the population was like that. Like, you know, I'm pretty sure every race had its group of people that were still living like uncivilized. But for the vast majority of the population, you get here, you find the vast majority of the population is still using bows and arrows, and y'all dudes is like already sailing across the damn fucking ocean. Ooh, excuse me. Y'all already sailing across the ocean and they're still in canoes rowing up the river? By the time Christopher Columbus gets here? I, you know, the theory is that they're obscuring the history on purpose, so therefore that the native population, which would be the copper colored people, would not understand that they're being occupied by a foreign government. You understand? By foreigners. We're in occupation. Look, they allowed some of their their citizens to move here, regular normal people with everyday lives, and they've built everyday lives, and they're really good people and peaceful people. But that doesn't stop the fact that they're all foreigners, and they migrated here, and then they took over and killed off the native people to lay claim to the golden land, or the land of honey, which is this probably was called. I'm not mistaken. I think historically this land was always known as the golden land, or the land of milk and honey. It always was known as a special place. So they came here, murdered the native population, brought in the Siberians. They brought them, or they they was here already. That's a little obscure too, but they was here too. They somehow got here, and then they paid them or worked with them to be Native Americans, to put them in place of the original people here, the Aboriginal Americans that was here already. Which I don't believe that Christopher Columbus came here and like discovered this place. I believe they came here with the intent to attack. I believe it was a combined effort between most nations. And I know this is a wild theory, and I'm pretty sure y'all have heard it online, but it's almost sounds believable when you look at when you start paying attention to certain things that happen whenever Black Americans try to unify themselves under a certain what is it, anything to try to bring us together. We're preaching hate. When we try to look out for our own people, when we try to express a form of prejudice for our own, it is seen as hate for the other people. But every other race operates with a form of prejudice towards another racial group, and it's perfectly fine. Also, you can throw in the fact that they enslaved us. The American people took away their surnames, and most of us today are walking around with European surnames. Those people with the tiny hats didn't go through that. They still kept their entire name and history and everything. And you can go back and you can find out the history of all of these other races and cultures. And I believe that the Black Americans are a hidden race and culture that they are trying to obscure out of history on purpose so they can continue to occupy the land of the native people in America. That's just my theory. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. That's the theory.